you know, eventually I'll be able to prove a lot of these theories wrong.
In part 1, we postulated that young DeOrr Kunz Jr. is actually alive, and most likely living under a given identity, in the Northwest United States, or possibly even Canada. In this video, we will explore the circumstantial evidence that supports our theory. First, here is a brief summary of events surrounding the disappearance of DeOrr Kunz Jr. By July 9, 2015, Jessica Mitchell had been the caretaker for her maternal grandfather for 6 months. A camping trip was quickly planned to supposedly celebrate Jessica's 6 months of stable employment. Timber Creek Camping Ground, in Lemieux County, Idaho, was chosen as the destination. 4 adults left Idaho Falls and arrived at the camping ground around 9 p.m., after a 2-hour drive. Camp was set up and everyone went to bed. After waking up without incident, the campers had a normal morning. In the early afternoon, Jessica, Vernal, and young DeOrr made a trip into the nearby town of Leadore to get supplies. It is important to note that the remote camping ground only had one unpaved road in and out. Less than an hour after returning from the trip to Leadore, and reportedly due to confusion regarding who was watching the child, young DeOrr disappeared.
What's the address of your emergency? I'm actually camping in Leadore, just outside of Leadore. My 2-year-old son, we can't find him.
Commentators and law enforcement conceived of 3 explanations for young DeOrr's bizarre disappearance. Scenario 1. An animal dragged young DeOrr from the campsite. This was considered highly unlikely. No blood or evidence of an animal attack were found. Young DeOrr was apparently wearing cowboy boots that were too large, and these boots would have fell off his feet if an animal dragged him away. Scenario 2. An unknown person abducted young DeOrr. This was also considered unlikely due to the remoteness of the campsite, and it is believed that someone would have spotted any vehicle coming or going. Scenario 3. Young DeOrr was killed due to an accident or foul play. Because the first 2 scenarios were considered very unlikely for most commentators, this left only an accident or murder as the only possibility. At True Crime Oracle, we theorize that there is actually a 4th scenario. We are calling it a quote, planned abduction. According to our theory, the trip into Leadore was really a preliminary meeting with whoever young DeOrr was going to be transferred to. In part 1, we used the moniker, Couple X, to refer to the hypothetical older man and woman that received young DeOrr. During the meeting in Leadore, young DeOrr was probably introduced to Couple X in a familial way, as an uncle and aunt, or grandfather and grandmother. This was so that when Couple X retrieved young DeOrr in the final transfer, young DeOrr would be at ease, having just met Couple X in Leadore. The connection to Couple X was probably through Robert Walton, from a past acquaintance. After the first meeting, Couple X could have trailed them back to the camp, to await the opportune time to make the final transfer. We theorize that this opportune time was created by Jessica's grandfather, when he asked Isaac to show them some fishing holes that were hundreds of feet away, and out of sight of the main campsite. While Isaac was out of sight, Couple X was probably signaled and pulled up to make the final transfer. After they decided to call authorities, Vernal drove over any tire tracks that couple X left behind, later using a trip for better cell phone service as an excuse. According to our theory, by the time the search began, young DeOrr was miles and miles away from the Timber Creek campground. The parents then attempted to direct suspicion away from themselves. Isaac seems to have been invited as a plausible patsy, and also to verify that young DeOrr was at the camp. It is also relevant to point out both private investigators that worked for the parents concluded the parents were hiding something. Jessica Mitchell married someone else, only 8 months after the disappearance. At the time of the disappearance, Jessica Mitchell and Vernal Kunz were behind on bills, and by most accounts, were irresponsible parents. Mitchell was known to have bouts of depression, and was apparently finding it difficult to fulfill her duties as a parent. In Part 1, we theorized that Jessica Mitchell and her grandfather were almost certainly party to the deception. We considered Vernal Kunz's involvement as questionable. However, since the release of Part 1, we have now changed our position, and now consider Vernal as most likely involved in the deception.
Now retired Limhi County Sheriff Lynn Bowerman named the parents suspects.
We've given them too many opportunities to tell us what happened if it was an accident, and there's been no interest in going that direction. So that tells me there's only one other possibility. It has to be a homicide.
Bowerman told me in 2016 it was highly unlikely baby DeOrr was kidnapped. There's one road in and one road out to the remote Timber Creek campground. And if an animal or person had taken him, there would be evidence left behind, like DeOrr's boots that were too big for him. Bowerman believed they would have fallen off. But after days and weeks of searching, not a trace of DeOrr found at the campground.
Sheriff Bowerman, he said, I don't even know if DeOrr was up there at that campground.
You know, eventually I'll be able to prove a lot of these theories wrong, but
What do you mean by that?
that's just a theory that is wrong.
I'm surprised by your reaction, really, because, I mean, in not so much words, he essentially called you a murderer, Jessica.
Yeah, and that, I just think about the truth is going to come out. And, you know, like other people, they're going to eat their words.